Brian. Make sure I'll stay on with it.
Excellent, Tim. That's perfect. Wow, we have great audience. Actually, we're already above almost about 400 people so far, and it's increasing every time I look at the screen. It's there are 50 or so in there. So welcome, guys. My email address is on the screen right now, bknight@pragmaticworks.com. This is Brian Knight. I'm the founder of Pragmaticworks. And today we're going to talk about how do we make your life easier when you're trying to administer SSIS. As Tim said, SSIS is a very, very critical piece of your infrastructure now. And we want to make sure that this is just humming. So a little bit about myself. I'm lucky you can't see a picture of myself right now because I am the other guy speaking. I'm the co-founder of Pragmaticworks, and I've written about a dozen books. A little known fact is I'm actually a Mountain Dew connoisseur as well. Now we're in Jacksonville, Florida. Tim mentioned he's in Boston. Now I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, where we got this beautiful weather outside, 95 degrees, balmy weather kind of outside, and this time of year you really should come. It's really nice. It's actually our corporate office right here in Jacksonville, and you can see my office is kind of top right there with the guy kind of hanging out there. So what we're going to learn today is really about how do we make your environment really hum with SSIS. And typically it comes down to really a constant battle that happens. First of all, on the left side, we have this developer. And this developer is really around, his thing is he wants to get this package done as fast as he can, get it out the door. He doesn't care about all the auditing pressures that the DBA is going to have. And then next to him, we have the DBA, and he cares about the scalability of this. What's his capacity going to be? How does he detect when a failure happens? And how is he going to deploy this very, very easily? So they both have different types of things they want. All right, just got a curiosity. First, maybe know who the left guy is there. Let's see, this ultimate kind of geek chic kind of thing. There we go. Tom knows. So. Very good. Wow, a lot of you guys actually know him. Yeah, he's from a show called IT Crowd, by the way. Yeah, it's a good show. So anyways, in today's session, we're going to talk about a few things. How do we make a better package for the DBA? So the DBA can easily find out what went wrong how. We're also going to talk about promoting your packages to production. So how do we make this an easy environment with zero to touch so I can deploy from QA to production very, very simply. Wow, actually about 30 of you guys knew who that guy on the left was. I'm actually impressed. It's kind of a little known show. The last thing we're talking about is scheduling and running the packages and actually monitoring this long term. So let's first start with how we're going to build a better package for the DBA. So our goal with logging and any kind of like auditing and frameworks type stuff like that, let's imagine we have 3 servers that are running SSIS. That could just as easily be 300 servers. Could easily cross multiple environments, QA, production. But let's just kind of limit our scope here to these 3 boxes. Ideally, in an ideal environment, I as a DBA don't want to have to go and sign in 3 servers each morning to figure out what failed last night. I want all 3 servers to push any kind of errors that they have into a central logging database. And I'll put reports on top of that database. Now, once we have that, no matter what the client interface is, whether it be a PDA phone, wow, looking at 1980s PDA phone right there, old Visio template, or a regular PC, no matter what the case is, I want to be able to see those reports and be able to diagnose in one location what broke last night. Okay? So there's a number of ways we can do that. I'm going to focus only on 3 ways. The first way is logging with a built-in SSIS mechanism. And first of all, let me kind of show you the problem. First of all, the problem is when I run this package, this sample job that I had right here, look at the history that this gives us. Now, as you can see, I've had a few failures here. And looking at the job history, if you're relying on SSIS to do the logging for you, you'll be disappointed, unfortunately. If you're relying on SQL Server Agent to do the logging for you, you're going to be really, really disappointed. So look at the kind of logging it gives us here. One big text block, and we're expected to diagnose what happened inside of this. So looking at this, you'll see, eventually you can kind of decipher that there's a divide by 0 error message. But trying to decipher that, and if you have lots and lots of different packages and hundreds of servers, you're going to have some problems. So this is not the proper way of logging, unfortunately. In DTS, it worked a little bit better than SSIS. So what we're relying on in SSIS is to do one of three ways of logging. The first way is logging with the built-in providers. Now those built-in providers can log a few ways, but the main ways you're going to log is either to the text file, which is not really practical when you have hundreds of packages. You can also log to a SQL Server table. Now the table that logs to varies based on the SQL Server version. And the last way we can log is with the Windows Event Log. Now this is perfect for things like if you want to hook into Tivoli or MOM or those kind of interfaces. You can log to the Windows Event Log and have Tivoli or MOM or DAD pick up the events from the Windows Event Log. So let me show you how that first way works and some of the weaknesses behind it. So I've got this simple package here. This does some random stuff. What it does is really inconsequential what it does. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click into pane here, go to logging, and as you can see, I'm going to turn on logging for the entire package and all its providers. Now I can log to any of these data providers right here, and this can be extended as well, by the way. But in my case, I'm going to log to the SQL Server table. When I hit Add, I'm going to log to my AdventureWorks Connection Manager, check this box, and then over in Details, I can specify what type of events do I want to log. Now keep in mind, my goal was to have a central table that I can go into in the morning and find out which packages across my entire enterprise broke. So things like, well, on error, that's of course an obvious one. On post-execute, and on pre-execute, we'll execute before a task, container, or package starts, and then after it finishes. On error, of course, is another one as well. But at a minimal, you want to do on error, post and pre-execute, and also you want to grab things like on warning potentially. It's up to you. On information is way too much information for most people. So most people find that on information is just too much noise. But what is interesting, if you want to monitor the pipeline components, so each given transform and source and destination in the pipeline or at the data flow, you can do on pipeline rows sent, and that gives you some really interesting information that we can use later. So I'm going to hit OK. Now also one thing else, I'm going to hit the advanced button here, and you can see which columns are going to be added. So you'll see here that there's a missing component here that we need to really solve my business problem. All right, so those columns that I have here, first of all, the computer that executed the package and the operator that executed the package. That may be SQL Server agent in most cases. The source name is who is calling this event and its ID. So is it a task, is it a container, or is it a package? One of those three things are usually calling this package. The execution ID is a unique instantiation of the package. If you execute one package 5 times, you get 5 execution IDs. And any kind of error text would go in this message text right here. So there's one key thing that's missing. To solve my problem before, I really need to have the package name. Now the package name is here, sort of. The way I would get the package name is through a source ID. So through a source ID or source name, what's going to happen is, let's imagine I've got this package right here that has, if this is my package, who has 1 container, and in red has 2 tasks. So what I would see is I would see in green here, package starting, container starting, task starting, and then on the yellow way out or orange way out, task stopping, task stopped, or container stopped, and then package stopped. So kind of it's a hierarchy here. So you'd have to do this kind of crazy self-join, and I have that self-join in my blog. I have a UDF that will kind of do that for you. But you have to kind of do this crazy self-join to kind of derive the package name. And you're kind of doing this grouping on execution ID and kind of navigating up the chain until you hit that. So if I hit OK right now, it's going to create a table. Now the table it creates is really contingent on the provider you're using. So is it using 2008? It uses one. 2005 uses another. So let me execute this package. Now we're going to see a whole bunch of stuff happen, but over in my AdventureWorks database, I'll go to my tables, and under my system tables, in 2008, you're going to see this table is called SSIS log, sys SSIS log. So when I run this, we'll see a number of rows. This is just one package execution. So we get a good amount of data here, operator, all those kind of things, the source ID, the execution ID. See, this is one execution from here to here. And one of the interesting things I think about this is the pipeline rows sent. So you can see here, if I kind of compress it, kind of highlight these rows right here. Let me expand this. And as you can see, it's showing me every step along the way. So this source outputted some rows, 4,012 rows, to this this source right here outputted the rows to this derived column, etc. So this derived column outputted to this flat file input, etc., etc., etc. So it's showing you each step along the way how many rows are going from step to step. So as you see, I started with 4,000 rows, and I kept on going and rows kind of filtered out as time went on. And we'll see that over here as well. See, 4,000 rows kind of went from here to here to here to here. Okay? So it's showing you how many rows went from this source to this destination, and this source, this destination, etc. So that's an interesting kind of thing we can do. But the problem I'm looking at here is the package name. Trying to derive a package name here. This is my package name right here. And I'm seeing package start. So I had to kind of look for that event right here and know it all on that. But I had to do this crazy self-join on these lower events to do that. So that's why I generally use another option. The other option we can use, open up my PowerPoint again. Okay, use my go button here. Here we go. The option I generally use is going to be to create my own logging with event handlers. And this gives you a lot of flexibility. So the first thing, the reason why I like using an event handler framework, your own management framework, is it gives you complete customizable. You can add send mail task, you can do email, you can do logging to a table. You are the architect of this at this point. So it gives you complete flexibility. Now the trade-off with this is it does become a little bit more difficult to deploy. So as you create 50 new packages, you're going to have to copy that framework code that you wrote into all 50 packages. Or imagine you have to modify the packages. I want to modify my framework in 100 packages. I had to go and touch all those packages. So to do this, I'm going to show you a quick demo of this. I'm going to hop back over to my package again. And I'm going to go to the Event Handler tab here. So I'm going to make sure nothing is selected. Go to my Event Handler tab. And this on-error event is going to run for every single error I get in my environment. And as you'll see in my toolbox, I've got all my different tasks that I had earlier. So I want to do a execute SQL task. And with that execute SQL task, I'm going to log the fact, log on warning, or on error, excuse me. Okay? So when I go into this, look at over here in my variables. So you'll see a whole bunch of variables. But if I hit this gray box, you see all the extra variables that you have available to you. These variables are all going to be things like error description, the error code, who ran it, was it run interactively. All those kind of things are really, really going to be important for things like Sarbanes-Oxley and just trying to track down an error. For example, for Sarbanes-Oxley, you're going to want to know, was it run interactively through a job or not? And who did this? So who is the author of it? Who actually ran it? And you'll see here package ID, package name. So all sorts of good stuff is available to you right here. Now, I'm going to go inside this task. I'm going to connect it up to my AdventureWorks connection. Now, I could put a SQL source right here, and I could type my statement and do question marks to represent variables going in. Because I have so many variables, I generally prefer to do an expression as I get more and more variables like this. So I'm going to hit the expression button, and what I want to do is I want to tie that SQL statement source right here to this expression. I'll hit the ellipsis button, and I can put my expression right here. Now I've got some code already written here. Let me find my good old-fashioned code that I have, and this will ultimately look something like this. I'm going to insert into a table. Let me kind of expand this a little bit so you can see, and let me evaluate it. So I'm going to insert into a table, SSIS log. I'm going to do these columns right here, and these are my variables I'm going to pass in. Now this is just a sample one, right? This can be a lot more complex. So we can easily have 50 columns in here. Matter of fact, most frameworks that I use has 20 to 30 columns in it. So when I hit evaluate, you can see the SQL statement it produces. This is why I like doing this way instead, is it helps me with debugging this. There's my GWIDs and all that data is already here. Now there are some variables that really come in handy. things like task name. The task name is the name of your event handler task, where source name is the name of the task that triggered the event. So it's a little fine difference there. So task name would be the name, if I used it here, would be the name of, see, you see here in this case, source name is the name of whatever task generated it, where task name would look like this. Let me hit OK, OK. In my case, it would be called log on error. So typically, I'll tie into that task name somehow, and that way I can just copy and paste this event over and over and over again. So when I run this package, let me actually open up one that's already kind of pre-configured and done. So what I've done on this one is the same exact thing. You've already seen it before. And over in the event handlers, you'll see there's an event handler for errors, post-execute, pre-execute, and sometimes people like warning as well. It all depends on if warnings are useful for you. Let me run this package, and we'll see it go. Now in this case, I'm logging to a new table. And this is a smaller table, keep in mind. This is not the normal one I would use, but this, for purpose of kind of visualizing this example, you'll see package name and package GUID right here, execution ID, all those kind of things are right here. So any kind of reports that you write should have a group by on the execution ID. Okay? So a good question here from Dexter, how would you write an expression to handle single quotes? You'd have to double up on those single quotes to allow you to handle that, or some kind of replace. So here we're seeing the source name. All the kind of information I need now to solve my business problem is now here. So there's other ways we can do this as well. And I'm going to show you another way. Let me pull up my slide deck. Okay. So far, in that demo, I showed you how to use event handlers to kind of create your own version of your logging framework as well. You can have things that send you emails there. So that way, any type of thing that bubbles up, I am completely abstract in my control flow. So I don't have to put all these red lines in my control flow to do this. I can have one event in my event handler that catches any kind of event. So you'll see over in post-execute, see it turn green. So all that stuff is all right here. Now if you want to trap like only the package post-execute, so you'll see this post-execute right here, it runs for every task, container, and package. So if I only want to trap a package completion, what I can do is I can just put a little sequence container here, wire this up here, and a trick you can do is double-click on the green line, change this to an expression and constraint, and I'll say, all right, if my source name, which you'll remember is actually who was calling the event, if it's equal to the package name, then I know the package is completing. So when I hit OK, you'll see now that this event will only fire off if the package is complete, not if the task is complete. So again, the way you do that is if the source name variable is equal to the package name, then you know you have a package completion event. So that's the way we do a lot of things in our next technique. So our last technique is really using the third-party component. Now this third-party component I'm going to show you, all the stuff I'm going to show you is part of a community version of it, which is free. So the goal of BI Express, which is something that we developed, I got tired of doing the same stuff over and over again. And the goal of it is really to help you deploying packages and also adding a whole series of frameworks around your packages. So let me show you what this looks like. All I'd have to do for this package back here is, let's say, for example, I want to right-click on the package. I'm going to go to my Add Auditing Framework. And again, the version I'm doing here is actually a free version. So I'm not trying to sell you anything here. I'm just trying to show you what the community version you can get on their website actually looks like. So I'm going to log to a central database called BI Express. I can also customize it right here. Hit Next and hit Start. So what it's doing right now is it's adding row counts into my data flow. It's going to count how many rows come out of my source, how many rows go into my destination, which is going to be important for Sarbanes-Oxley. And it's also tracking things, adding a whole bunch of event handler code as well. Now I could have added this into 100 packages all at one time with the regular edition. And as I go into this, okay, let me let this refresh the screen. There we go. And over here in the data in the control flow, let me format this so I can kind of realign this. You'll see there's a row count here and a row count here it added. It added all the event handlers. As you see, it kind of, it's a little bit funny right now. Just have to kind of realign this. There we go. So it added these event handlers here for errors, and on post-execute it added a whole bunch of code here as well. So a lot of code it added for me automatically. So and as you can see, it's tracking for things like if the exit package fails and those kind of things. So let me try the same thing here. If I run this package again, we'll see it start to run. Now, what's nice about this now is I can go to BI Express, go to View Auditing Reports, and these are some of the reports that I've written. So I can look at a single package here and see, oh, there's a package that's finished running, and I can see it's outside of bids now. You can see how many seconds each tech took to run. Look at old packages here as well. You can kind of stack them side by side here as well and see how the old one and the new one's doing after I made my change. And we can see how each step is taking to run. I can also go to recent executions and see it this view as well. So all these are just reporting services reports. I can drill into it and see how long each step took to run in the package, what the variables were set to. Lots and lots of reports that we give that are free out of the box. Okay, so let me close this down so you get the idea. So I've showed you 3 ways to really add framework around your packages. The first way was the logging mechanism. And the logging mechanism is great, but it has some problems around giving you complete control, like showing you package names or other things like that you may want. The other one was adding event handlers. This was great because you have full customizability, but had some difficulties around deployment of that framework. The third thing I showed you was really BI Express. And what's great about that is it injected the framework that's being used by hundreds of companies now, but and in that case, it also will deploy that to 100 packages all at one time. So as the framework changes, it simply does that. You can go to pragmaticworks.com to download the community edition, by the way. So our next piece is really around configuration. Now the challenge we're trying to solve here is trying to deploy our package from QA to production or development to QA to production with zero-touch deployment. I don't want to have to open up these packages over and over and over again. So I can, to do configuration, I can store my configuration values in a table or into an XML value. But other places we can store them as well, like environment variables and parent package variables as well. Okay. So if I go back out of here, let me. As you can see, I hate demos, or I hate slides, so we do a lot of demos here. So I'm going to go back to my configuration piece. Now, as you can see, let me get rid of this. Oh, a good question here. This session is being recorded, by the way, so if you have any other developers that want to watch this, you can go back to pragmaticworks.com later today, and you'll see the session recordings will be posted there. So what I have here is a script task with a simple pop-up message. It's going to pop up the value of this variable right here. So what I want to show in this is how we can use configuration files to ultimately make this easier. So when I run this package, you'll see right now all it does, it just does my own little hello world example. A little angst problem, a little anger problem, but that's okay. So my goal now is to make that value configurable. Let me also do something else. Let me create a new connection somewhere here as well. I'm just going to show you a few things all at once. Okay, so I created a configuration here. So I created a connection manager down here. Just take the local host out. All right. And what I want to do is I want to right-click inside of here, and I'm going to go to Package Configurations. I'm going to check Enable Package Configurations and hit the Add button. I'm going to walk through a wizard here. Now, there's a number of places we can actually store these configuration values. To me, I like XML files for the portability of them. A lot of people use SQL Server tables, and there's nothing wrong with it. But to deploy that change from QA to production now, I got to write an insert script to also add that configuration change there. Now, once that configuration change is there, it's super, super simple. But it's that first deployment of a new value into a SQL Server table, which is a little bit of a pain. So we also can store values in registry keys. Don't do that, of course. What some people do is they store the location of this SQL Server table as an environment variable, which is a great solution also. I'm going to do an XML file because it's very, very easy to see. I'm going to put this in just a quick folder here called Presentations, and I'll call this myconfig, I misspelled intentionally, .xml. When I hit Next, you'll see that I can store any type of configuration information I want to. So for example, this variable right here, I want to store its value, which is getLostWorld, in this file. Now we can also tie this into the connection managers. So things like the server name and the database name can also be stored there. Now, these can be reused by 100 packages. So if you have 100 packages out there that need to ultimately touch this connection, that's not a problem. You can have all 100 packages, and I've got a configuration file that points to my staging database perhaps. All 100 packages can touch that same configuration file, and then as I want to move that from QA to production, I just change that config file, and now all 100 packages swing over to production from a configuration perspective. So I would deploy this config file to each of my servers, and I would typically have it in the same exact folder in dev, QA, and prod. And as I deploy the packages, it becomes a zero-touch deployment after I change the values. Also keep in mind that you typically want to store a config file value, so in this case my database here. Each database should ideally have its own configuration file. The reason for that, and in tables it should have its own filter, is if you point to a file and you're missing values, like I'm pointing to a file and I'm missing a certain connection, you're going to get warnings and potentially errors in your package. So let's say I put everything into one config file. So if I had 50 different connection managers all in one big Uber config file, and I pointed package B at it now, what would happen is I would get some warnings saying configuration value not found, and potentially my package would fail. So you want to make sure that you avoid that kind of scenario. So the way that I try to avoid it is I create config files per object, per connection manager, and then I go and cherry pick it. So a good question here, William, would you mind expanding on your question here? It says, can the values of the config file be hidden from the developer? So I assume what you want to do there is you want to encrypt the values. Is that correct? So I'm going to wait for that answer here in a second. I'm going to hit next in the meantime while William's answering that. Now you'll see here a few things. Now these are the properties that are going to be stored inside this. So these properties right here, this is property path, and we're going to use this property path later. So just keep a mental note on this is how we can determine the property path. So I'm going to call this, I'll call this just my connection, and hit finish and close. So now we have the config file. Let's go ahead and edit this now in Notepad. So as we can see, for example, let's see if I can find get lost world here. Here's my get lost world. I'll say I'm better now. So I'm not quite as angst now. And if I run this package now, watch what happens. Oops. I ran the wrong package. That's a lesson in why not to do what I just did. So let me go to configuration again and run this package. And we can see the new value is now being populated. So as William is pointing out, he's pointing out a key problem with config files and config tables, and that is that they are unencrypted. So we're seeing that all the values here, let me actually open this up a little better view here. Let me open this up in just regular old Internet Explorer here. So we'll see that my database name, my server name, even my passwords would all be unencrypted, which could be a problem with William as he's pointing out here. So there is no way to solve this with the native stuff that's built into SSIS. Now we're building the functionality to do that inside of BI Express, but if you want to, what you can do is you can have it encrypted, have it stored as a variable, encrypted, and then you can have a script task to decrypt it. So you'd have to kind of hash it somehow, your password values, and then use a script task to unhash that value. So there are ways of doing it. It is very, very cumbersome right now to do it, William, unfortunately. I wish I had a better answer for you. Okay. So, all right. So we have some great questions coming up. I'll have to kind of hold some of those to the end. But all right. So as you can see, we were able to easily configure that. So now if I copy this config file over from dev to QA to prod, it makes it for a very, very easy deployment. Okay, so speaking of deployment, let me open up my slide deck again, and I have a few quick questions here. Yes, absolutely. So Bryant is having a good point here. The workaround that most people do, including myself, in William's case, so William was concerned about security of that config file, is just use regular Active Directory security to protect that file, and only make it where the SSIS service can see it, and the SQL Server agent job, and maybe a few selected DBAs can see that config file. So that's kind of a workaround that's a lot easier right now. Okay, but some people, some top six have some really funny security requirements. Okay, so which brings us to our next topic, and which is really around the deployment piece. Okay, so a question here about will you please repeat how to add event handlers for multiple packages? So I used a third-party tool there, a free third-party tool. It was called BI Express to do that. It's a question from Malind, and it will do all that work for you. So it creates that framework code that I invented a long time ago automatically for you. Okay, so is there a way to get back to the source flow, data flow that you in bids? Okay, so is there a way to get back to the source data flow that you see in bids? Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely get to that here in a second. So back to deployment. The first question that most people have around deployment is, where should I store this package? In the MSDB database or the file system? Now, everybody has an opinion on this. It's almost like it's a religious battle almost with SIS developers. So it really depends on a few things, and there's no wrong answer here. It depends on what's more important to you. And I have a quick grid down here to kind of show what's more important to some people. And I kind of highlight this in my books also, but let me kind of zoom in on this grid, and let's pretend we're kind of going through some quick litmus test here. So if I'm looking at, there's really two places I can store my packages. I can store them in the MSDB database or on the file system, either way. So from the first perspective, as far as easing of security, the MSDB is going to be much easier to secure your packages. The reason why is in MSDB database, you can limit who can execute your package and who can update the package. These are called package roles. On the file system, you're dependent on package passwords, and you're also dependent on the AD security. So those two pieces are the really important aspects of that. So from an MSDB perspective, it wins the first battle. The next one is ease of deployment. For the MSDB deployment, it's a little tricky. You're going to have to right-click and say import. You can use dtutil. You can also do it inside of bids and by creating a build file. I'll show those to you in a second here. On the file system, you simply copy and paste the package from dev to QA to prod into the file system, and then you're all done. So from a file system perspective, it's much easier to deploy your packages to the file system. So troubleshooting. So let's say you get that 4 a.m. call in the middle of the night, and you want to troubleshoot your package and figure out why it broke. Well, of course, if you're a hardcore Sarbanes-Oxley company, you can't do this. You can't open up the package in production and start troubleshooting. But let's say you're not a hardcore Sarbanes-Oxley company. Let's say you just want to get the job done, and you've got an exception around that. So if you just want to get the job done, you can, and you're storing the packages in the file system, you can open up that package inside of bids from the file system. You create a quick project and do that, and troubleshoot your package step by step. If you're in the MSDB, you're going to have to reverse engineer the package out of the MSDB and then do all that. So from a troubleshooting perspective, it's going to be easier to troubleshoot inside the file system. Now the last one is performance. There's really no performance consequence either way from MSDB to file system. So really it comes down to an ease of security versus an ease of troubleshooting and deployment. If deployment is easier for you, then I would definitely recommend, more important, I would definitely recommend the file system. If security is going to be more important on the ease of security, then definitely do the MSDB database. There's about 100 other factors here as well, but those are some of the 3 or 4 big ones that I want to make sure I bring up. Now, the other question I get asked often is where do I store these packages? You know, do you recommend that, now here's a good one also. So Natasha, I hope I didn't kill your name there. The comment here was that he or she liked the MSDB because of the backup. So that's a little bit of a misnomer, and the reason why it's challenging is because, and that's why most DBAs think it's like I can back up the MSDB database. I know it's being done. I can restore those packages very, very easily. Unfortunately, think about how you're going to restore that MSDB database. When you restore the database to yesterday's backup, you're going to lose all your job history and any packages that you may have added to the MSDB since the backup. So unfortunately, the backup can sometimes create more problems after you restore it. So the great point, backupping, that's what initially drew me to the MSDB also, was like I'll put the MSDB as part of my regular maintenance plan and everything's going to work. But unfortunately, I had to restore the database at one point. And when I restored the database, it caused a lot more problems than actually helped in my case. So so it kind of creates some interesting scenarios around that. So in this case, let's think about where we want to store this package. So we can store the package on its own box, potentially, and create an SSIS server. And all it does is churn through packages all day long. The advantage of that is by doing this, now I can beef up that box on RAM, and it can use all that system resources. The problem, though, is now it's having to pull all this data from SQL Server 1, process it on the SSIS server, and then push it over to SQL Server 2. So I'm getting a little bit of quite a bit of a performance hit on the network side. It's also causing a network license or a licensing issue as well. If I push this over to SQL Server 1, at this point, it's going to cache all the data on SQL Server 1, then push it over to 2. Same thing on 2. Whether it runs on 1 or 2 is really inconsequential. I generally run it from the destination server, so it helps some of the bulk operation. But it all depends on your scenario. I typically do not run it on its own machine, though, and the reasons why are the network traffic. Now, if you're worried about that server eating up all your resources, the SSIS service eating up all your resources, you can use a tool called WSRM, Windows System Resource Manager. This is a free tool that's built into Windows 2008, or it's a part of the resource kit in 2003. And what it does is you can set some guidelines around this. You can say, all right, at 4 p.m. in the afternoon until 8 p.m., that's my peak hours. And SQL Server has 80% of my resources, and SSIS can only have 10% of my resources. After 8 p.m., though, no problem. It's game on, wild, wild west. SSIS can have 50% of my resources. Now, this is a soft cap, and what I mean by soft cap is if at 4 p.m., when SSIS is only allowed to have 10%, if SQL Server does not need all 80% of my resources, it will allow SSIS to kind of encroach on its space. However, as soon as we realize that SQL Server needs more resources, it'll immediately push down SSIS again. So it makes it kind of a soft cap. So it's a good question. Is WSRM available in Standard Edition? I believe it's an Enterprise Edition for Windows, but it's been a while since I've checked the licensing piece. I believe it's Enterprise Edition, but I can't quite be 100% certain. Okay, so let's kind of demo some ways you can deploy your packages. I'm going to hop out here. So one way, there's at least 8 ways of deploying your packages. There's tons and tons of ways of doing it. So the first way I can do it is by going to File, Save Copy As, inside of the biz environment, and I can deploy my package to the file system, the SSIS package store, or the SQL Server. So the SSIS package store, all that is an abstraction layer that abstracts out these 2 areas that you see here in blue. So what I mean by that is if I pick my package store, I'll type my server name of localhost, all I'm doing now is I'm connecting to my service, and as you can see, I'm getting my MSDB, and I'm also getting my file system right here as well. Okay? So it's kind of abstracting this out to where it doesn't really matter if I'm going to my file system or my MSDB. The service's job is going to be to watch over what packages are presently running and do a few other things like caching providers and those kind of things. So I could easily deploy my packages this way. Now the problem here is I'm deploying it onesie, twosie kind of fashion. The other way of deploying that package is with the package utility. So I can right-click on the project, go to Properties, and under Deployment Utility, I can change this Create Deployment Utility to True. Now when I do this, and I do a build my project, it's going to create a whole series of files that are necessary to deploy my package. So let me see where my packages are actually stored at. They're stored right here. Okay, I'm going to go to that folder here. And in the bin and deployment folder, you'll see all the files I need to deploy this entire project. So including my config files, by the way, right here. So if I double-click on this SSIS manifest file, it opens up the package installation wizard. Now, as I hit next, I can deploy the SQL Server or the file system either way. Now, the problem here is, so let's say I go to file system. I hit next. It's going to deploy this folder right here. So the challenge here is this. So let me browse out. And I want to deploy this to my 10 folder, not my 90 folder. That's okay. I'll deploy to 90. It's fine. So when I hit next, it's going to also open, and it's failing because this is actually SQL Server 2008, not 2005. So, but after it does this, it actually lets me manage my config files also. But the challenge here is it also changes the location of my config files as it's deploying. So the package installation wizard is not quite as nice as I want it to be, which is why we did another free utility, and that is called, as part of BI Express, it will actually deploy your packages for you also. So I'll select this. I'm going to change the location of my config files right here. I'll keep them in the same location. Hit next. And I want to deploy, let's say, these 3 packages over to production. Here's a production server right here. And I'll hit the right button now. And off it goes. So right now it's deploying all 3 packages to my production environment. And after it does that, it validates the package to make sure it's going to work. And as you can see, everything looks to be pretty darn good. So that's another easy way to deploy your packages. And the last way you can deploy them, there's other ways as well, but another way we can do it is if I connect to my integration services service, and I change I go down to my stored packages, and I see my MSDB, for example, here, my demos. I can right-click on this and say Import Package. That's another way of deploying your packages also. Again, there's lots of challenging ways of doing this here. So let me go back to my slides one more time. Now the next piece is really around the SSIS service. And I mentioned before, it's going to monitor which packages are running, and there's a few other things as well. Now we're going to run our packages through DTExec. Now the challenge here is a 64-bit challenge. It comes in 2 flavors, a 32-bit and a 64-bit flavor. Now you may wonder why do I need a 32-bit flavor of this? And the reason why is sometimes some providers are not 64-bit capable. Things like the old Excel driver that comes with MDAC is not 64-bit capable. I said Excel driver, it's really the JET driver. So packages that touch Excel and that touch Access will have issues. There are also some third-party DLL components that you may be adding that may not be 64-bit capable also. So that's why we have a 64 and 32-bit flavor of this. Now we'll be using the tool called DTExec UI to call DTExec. And let me show you how this works. This is super simple. So if I want to go back over here and run the package that we did last time, let's say I want to run this guy right here. I'm going to right-click on him and hit the Run button. I can also double-click on the package itself. Okay. And if I look at this package, as you can see, I'm hitting my MSDB database here. I can go and I can overlay new config files. So if there are any new config files, I can overlay them right here. I can also, this is really nice, I can change the location of any connection inside that package. So if I want to change this rather than local, if I want it to be localhost, I can just overlay it, so I type my production server name right now, and for this one execution of the package, it will use that new location. Also under execution options, we can do a few things like turning on checkpoints, which we'll come back to later. And I can turn on a different level of reporting, like maybe I only want to see the errors and not the verbose error messages. Now the set values, this is where you can pass in any value that you want to. And they look like this, like package dot, and we'll say like variables, and specify your variable in double quotes, and you would put the value right over here. Now I'm going to turn that off right now, but you get the idea. So you can pass in any value ad hoc into the environment. Now this is the command line that's being run. So if I were to run this package right now, it's going to run this package in 32-bit mode. But if I wanted to run this in 64-bit mode, all I have to do is drop the DOS and type in dtexec. You'll see right now I'm running the 64-bit flavor of dtexec on my laptop. I'm going to type in dtexec, paste in this, and this is my package I'm running. Hit the go button, and we'll see it now fire off. By the way, we can also hit the monitoring button over here in BI Express and watch these bad boys fire off also. This is all live, so we're seeing this package run, live in production. Okay, so we're seeing this now, the error that happened, and all the type of messages that are happening right here. So that's the nice thing about this. Now, if you want to, let me actually hop over and show you how to schedule the package now. So let's try to schedule this package right we're looking at here. To schedule, use the standard SQL Server agent, but we could use this command line right here to schedule it through other means also. So if you have another mean like gosh, if you're using like the CA tool or Task Scheduler or those kinds of tools, you can use that to schedule your packages also. Now I'm going to create a brand new job, and you've probably seen how to create new jobs before, so I'm going to go into under steps and hit the new button, call the step, whatever. I'm going to use a SQL Server Integration Services package. I'm going to fire it off with a SQL Server agent account, and I'm going to point to my local host, go to my package store, local host. I'm going to point to my package that I want to fire off, which is that one we just uploaded, which is this guy right. That'll work right here. I'll fire him off. Okay, so now that we have that, again, we can change the data sources right here to point to any new location. All the same options are here except for this new option. Now, SQL Server Agent will always run the package in 64-bit if you have a 64-bit box, unless you check this box right here. Now, this is in SQL Server 2008. In SQL Server 2005, you would have to modify the executable that's being fired off to point to the 32-bit version of it. There's also a new switch inside of dtexec called /x86, and you'll see that right over here in the command line. So you'll see the /x86 switch right here. Okay, so if I run this package, of course, I need to schedule it and all that. Now, there are a number of ways, key reasons that this package is going to fail, or any package might fail. Okay, so think about the number one issues that you've experienced as you try to deploy these packages. So developer executes it, runs great on the developer's machine. He hands it over to you to deploy to QA or to production. And all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. The package cannot run. So the first thing I always do is make sure I have a logging framework turned on to see why it's having problems. But let's say, for example, you're getting a corrupted XML error. The reason for that error is back over in your package. Let me go back over to here. If I look at my package properties, this is a really key property here. The property is called the protection level property. Let me kind of expand this a little deeper here so you can look into it. So what we're seeing here is a default property is encrypt sensitive with user key. This is the number one bug, not bug, but problem that people have in SSIS. If they do encrypt sensitive with user key, and they store things like DB2 or Oracle or even SQL Server passwords in their package, whenever I pass my package over to you with this setting now enabled, you don't have my user key. My user key is made up of my machine's hash code on my profile. So if I even sign off of my machine and sign on with your profile on my machine, the package will fail. It will try to open the package up. It will see that it doesn't have the right hash code, and all the sensitive data in that package is wipe-free. So that setting is not a very good option for those that are storing SQL Server authentication items. A better setting for most people is going to be encrypt sensitive with password, which will prompt the user for a password. Inside the SQL Server agent job, you can do /decrypt, type the password, and then you're all good for the package password. You can also, if you want to really lock it down, you can do encrypt all with password, which will lock down the entire package with the password, so nobody can even execute the package at that point unless they have that. So lots of interesting options around that. So that's one of the big key reasons of failure, is you'll run the package in production, it can't see the machine hash code, and it blows up. The other thing that might be causing a failure, let's say instead of using SQL Server authentication, you're using Windows authentication. Now in this case, look at who it's running the package under. It's running it under the SQL Server agent account, which may not have access to the right databases. So the way to solve that is by creating a proxy. And really briefly, I'm just going to show you how to do a proxy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go under Security, go to Credentials, I'm going to create a new credential, and I'm going to create a credential called just Brian was here. And it's going to map to my Brian Knight account, which I'll do just bknight-pc, and then bknight. That's my AD account and my AD password here. Okay, I'll hit OK. So I had that Brian Knight was here. I'll next create a quick proxy. So I created the ID that's going to be shared if I'm a sysadmin. Now I'm going to create a proxy saying Brian was here, proxy. And I now want to say, how can people use my credential? Well, I want to allow people to use my credential only by SQL Server Integration Services packages and only by these accounts. So whatever these accounts are right here. Okay. Now, if I do this, make sure that that proxy that I created does not have a password that cycles, right? So if I do that, I'm going to have problems. Okay. So as I go down here, again, this is for Windows authenticated passwords. If I go back to my job now and go back to my step, I'll fix my problem with Windows authentication by selecting this proxy. Now, my package, anywhere I need Windows credentials, it will use my account, my Brian account, not the SQL Server agent account now. So that's how you can use proxy and you kind of solve the other half of the problems that we see. A good question here from Paul is, what does the don't say sensitive option do? So what that option does is it is going, now that's back over here in the package settings again, and you solve don't say sensitive. So basically it's relying on something else to say the sensitive data. That something else is usually going to be a config file. You can also store the configuration settings on the server. This is only if you're doing MSDB database. So it's another case for the MSDB database. If you're using the MSDB database, you can store all the configuration settings inside the server side, and then you don't have to worry about the whole protection level stuff. Okay, let me hop back over to here. Back to my slides again. So in that demo, I showed you how to schedule your packages and also how to run the packages as well. Now the last thing just kind of briefly mentioned is restartability. And what restartability gives you the ability to do is ultimately through checkpoints, if a package fails, you've seen a package like this at some point. Let's say the package fails on the last step, which is a cleanup step. So if that step fails, a checkpoint file will be written to disk. That checkpoint file will be an XML file on disk. So when I run the package again after fixing the problem, it would start where the package left off at. Really, really brilliant option around that. So unfortunately, I don't have time for a demo there, but you can find some demos on that out on the web on SQLshare.com or also on our website as well. So on the troubleshooting performance issues, if you're worried that you're running out of CPU or memory, typically SSIS can be more memory intensive. So the perfmon stat to check is going to be buffer spooled. What buffer spooled means is the amount of 10 meg by default buffers that have been spooled to disk. So you would see that perfmon setting over here. There it is. So if I hit the add button, you'll see those settings right under the SSIS pipeline events. So right here, under pipeline events, you'll see buffers in memory, buffers in use, and buffer spooled. This is actually some pretty interesting stuff. So you can see your buffer spooled is how many 10 meg buffers are on disk. That's a red light. Big error signals there. All of a sudden, your 10-minute package to run is taking 10 hours to run. Buffers in use actually gives you some interesting data about, it's like your warning signal. It's a flare going up. So when your buffers in use is going above your amount of allocated memory, you'll start to see buffer spooled to disk. So watch those two counters in whatever monitoring tool that you're using to kind of watch for those any kind of performance problems in SSIS. Okay, let me hop back over to our slide one last time. So in this presentation, I showed you a few things. I showed you how to add your own auditing framework to your packages, also how to deploy your packages, and how easy it was to debug errors on a deployed package once you had a proper auditing framework in place. It helps you pass any kind of Sarbanes-Oxley audit, and makes your DBAs a lot happier. My contact information is on the screen right now, and I now want to open it up for questions. We have a few minutes here for questions, and they're starting to pile up right now. Let me kind of go through that. We actually had over 500 people that were in this session, so I really appreciate, guys, for coming. Tim, I want to open it up for you while I'm looking at questions.
Absolutely, Brian. Nice job. We are at the top of the hour, and you've been answering questions throughout, so I'll go ahead and let you read them. I'm not sure if I don't want to replicate any that you've already gone through.
No problem.
I'll tell you another thing we're doing on the way out today, folks, as you end and head out to lunch if you're on the East Coast. There's an awful lot of you in the audience today that are BI Express users. You've been with us the last couple of years, and you use the software that we have here. And Brian touched on it here and there in today's presentation. And what we're offering as you exit is a free workshop for anybody who uses BI Express. So any of you existing customers, I know there's a bunch of you in the audience looking at some of the company names. And for those who are interested in perhaps taking a look at BI Express, you can go ahead and download a trial. It's free. It's on the website. But we're going to have this it's a 3-hour SSIS expert level workshop. And it is, here we go, and it is on August 15th between 2 and 5 o'clock. So you've got a couple weeks here to trial, see if you like it, and if you own BI Express, the workshop is free. That's to help our existing customers get the most out of the product. From there, Brian, I'll switch to you. You have some questions.
All right, I have a few questions here. We're almost out of time here, so we'll make sure I get to those. A great one from Saeed here, do you mind handing it back over to me, Tim?
Oh, you got it, yep.
Okay, so Saeed is asking a question up front. One of the first questions I got, I was neglected him for too long here. He has a package that's having problems running in 64-bit mode, and I'm assuming that's in BIDs. So I kind of covered a number of 64-bit issues, but one thing I did not point out was if you want to run that package in 32-bit mode inside of BIDs, what you have to do is you have to right-click on the project, go to Properties, and you'll see under Debugging, Run 64-bit runtime right here. Change that to false, and that package will work inside of BIDs as well. And I covered how to do that inside of other environments as well. Okay. Let's see here. Do you have a good? Okay, so we have questions about. Can you touch on run authority? I know in BIDs, yeah, it's running. Yep. So I did touch on that. So hopefully, David, hope you get your answer there. Okay, and I think I'm afraid we're almost out of time here.
Yeah,
I did touch on most of the questions, looks like. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me or contact me on the email address that you have on the screen here in a second. But thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, we did have one question from Tammy on the workshop, Brian. Just to clarify to everybody, it is on August 15th. It's a free 3-hour workshop. It's going to delve into the standards and all of the things that Brian touched on today. We're going to delve into. It includes mentoring, and it is interactive, and it will be recorded as well, so that is something that you can look at, and it will be done via GoToMeeting. And again, that's for anybody who owns BI Express, so existing customers and any new customers of ours. That's on August 15th. Thank you again.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
Thank you. We're going to end the webinar now. Thank you.